Actually, there's several key areas, and I think Per alluded to that very nicely earlier in the morning. First key area is basically knowing what problem you're trying to tackle and knowing the scale of the problem. We all throw numbers around, but we actually don't have that much information. Second is to have the evidence to actually come up with sound recommendations. We don't have enough evidence on what works, how to scale up. Third major area is actually scaling up. We are good at coming up with pilot projects, we're good at coming up with small projects. We fail at scaling up at country level, scaling up at sector level. And the fourth area I would point out is investment. We are good at investing sectorally, we don't have effective means of investing across sectors. Those would be my key challenges. I think the second panel was exciting because we actually learned of what works and what doesn't work in some cases. The Brazil story for me was exciting because there we actually were not only heard about what made a success, but we learned some of the lessons that came out from the experiences. And I was struck there by at least three lessons. I was struck there by the commitment. The key lesson about commitment at the highest level. I was struck there by the fact that they committed to eradicate, and that then cascaded down and then informed and influenced policies. And I was struck by the lesson of adjustment, mid-course adjustment, correction, having a mechanism by which you are feeding in these lessons and making adjustments. That is something I think we have to really absorb. We are all good at coming up with the first design and running and implementing, but we're not very good at then making adjustments as we go along, and that I thought was a very important lesson. I was struck by the Uganda story about communication, about how to build champions, about how to build an advocate for this and use communication tools effectively. And as we go ahead, I think we are going to have to find ways to communicate much more broadly. I was struck by the Rwanda story, by the scale, by the ambition, by the innovation. And I was struck there by some of the governance issues about inclusion of gender squarely, also in governance, not just in design. So, and I was struck by the NEPAD story, struggling to find a way to do this at the continental scale. And looking at different innovations and mechanisms, and by the frank acknowledgement we've not gone as far as we want to, which then I think opens up the door for innovation to do more. So yeah, I really thought that last panel really brought home to us learnings, what works, what doesn't work. I think for the community as a whole, the real issue is how to translate this into action. Delhi was a forum for catalyzing, for awareness, for communication. We now have to really move forward from translating from research. We have to do the necessary research, but we also need to simultaneously find means to translate from research into program, into project, into policies. So I think for the community as a whole, momentum has been created. How then do we move forward with concrete and actionable plans and programs, and how do we invest in them? I don't know that we yet know. And I think the other thing is, how do we broaden out the partnership? This is not a government issue. This is not a research issue. This is, I think, is how do you create effective modalities for collaboration and networks that involve civil society, because they are at the frontier. And so is the private sector. Private sector is at the frontier also. How then do you create that momentum?